Hello friends, this is Scott in my home office and welcome to part 2 of my 2021 year in review. The first video, part 1, was from January to April, and I thought that I'd do May to some other future month. I thought maybe 3 months. Well, when I started looking at May, May was a crazy month. I did lots of stuff, lots of different stuff at my home garden, had lots of happenings going on here. I was at the project garden. And then I started another project garden where I was helping a buddy with some landscaping and removal of some trees. So this video, which I thought was going to be 3 months, ends up just being about May. There's tons of photos I've been compiling, and I went through all my photos for May, and I've got flowers and vegetable progress and miscellaneous happenings throughout the yard and some interesting things. You know, I've become a lot more observant now that I've done this YouTube channel. So I take pictures of some whatever I see that I find is interesting, I take a shot of it. So anyway, this year though, I'm gonna up my game because for Christmas I got a little new something here. So instead of using my phone for videos, I've got a new camera that I'm gonna use. So we'll see if my quality of my videos improves, and that's my goal, is to get better at what I'm doing. Try to learn something new every day, but you know, not every day I learn anything. So anyway, well, welcome to part 2, and I apologize, this is going to be a lot longer than I expected it to be, but it's another 15 to 17 minute video. I can't remember exactly, but it's just the month of May, and May was busy. So let's get to it. For the first time in my memory, the 1st of May, we have quail in the backyard. I've seen them in the front yard before, living in some bushes across the street at the neighbor's house. See them cross the street now and then, but this is the first time I've seen these quail in my backyard. And there's another pair. There's another male-female. So we're hoping there's going to be some babies marching through here a little later in the season. But right now, they're here enjoying themselves and getting a little snack to start May. And here they are sharing the feeder with dove. Now that we have mourning doves and ringneck doves that live in the yard, they nest in the trees in the front yard, and once in a while in the backyard. But there's about 3 pairs of doves that frequent my yard. So they're trying to get along, but it appears the quail are the dominant species here. I hear a lot of chirping from the birdhouses, and as you see, this one here was hungry, and he realized this isn't mom, with his brother behind him, and then they disappeared. Mr. Lincoln must know that May is going to be a busy month because he's taking a lot of snoozes out on the deck, enjoying the warm, sunny weather. To start the gardening aspect of this video, we start with tulips. These are my favorite tulips that come up. Now, tulips in my yard, they've got different varieties, and they all seem to come up at different stages and different times. So we seem to have tulips for a month and a half of the spring into early summer. Another look at the inside of a tulip. And we have all different shades and colors. I still need to add more to them, but this is a black tulip, and that's a beautiful tulip. It's kind of different. But we enjoy our bulbs, although I don't take the greatest care of them. They just seem to keep coming back year after year. And here's another one of my favorites. This is at the project garden. Really a pretty tulip. The bleeding hearts are doing awesome. They're filling in, and I always say that they're being pumped up with air because they look shriveled when they first grow, and then they pump up. And here is peonies, and the peonies are growing, and from the beginning of May to the middle of May, they just keep on putting on until they flower, and this was toward the end of May. Beautiful. Beautiful pink. Next up are lilacs. Beginning in May, they're starting to flower. And then the clusters fully form. And they're just gorgeous. They smell great. Now this white one was at my project garden number 2. And I really enjoyed seeing this flower in my buddy's yard. Then we have the snowball bushes from the neighbors that are overhanging into my yard. They start out with kind of a greenish tint to them, and they get more vibrant in color, and then they start to turn white. You'll start to see the transition, and here they are, just a mass of white flowers. Beautiful. Make a little bit of a mess, but they're a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. Next up is the Wisteria Bush that's in my chicken run. The chickens have really dug a lot of holes and damaged the roots of this bush, but they're hanging in there. It's still blooming nicely. The iris are blooming in early May to mid-May at the Project Garden. He has a couple different colors, yellow and a kind of a pinkish purplish variety, but very pretty, don't last very long, but they add a lot to the garden. Now in my front yard, the coral bells are coming in. They're a dainty little flower, but they add a lot of interest to the garden. One of the earliest plants that starts growing in the spring are poppies, and they get to be pretty good size very quickly. And they start putting on their flower buds. They change a little bit of color. You start seeing the stems expand, lengthen, and then they start to brown up a little bit on the tips, and they burst into bloom. Now I have orange poppies in both my front and backyard. They're pretty little flowers. And again, they don't last real long either, but a few days and they're gone. But I also have a pink, kind of a salmon colored variety. And here's some pictures of them bursting open. Kind of interesting to watch as they shed their skin and fully come to flower. But they are a pretty flower. Now May starts the flowering of the roses. You start getting blooms about mid-month here in Utah. And these are just a couple of varieties that we have. This is at a friend's house. They're not mine. I can't claim these. They're pretty though. Caught my eye. These are my climbing roses in the backyard. I have pink and red, and the red started blooming in mid-May. And here is my favorite rose of the year. This is what I use as my cover photo for my YouTube. Very pretty rose. Now the Columbines are another early season flower, and they start, probably one of the earliest to flower. I've got several different colors of columbine, but you start seeing the first of the pests. Aphids love columbine. They love roses, but I found a lot on the columbine this year. But they come up and they seed out and they just expand throughout your yard, and they probably hybridize back into their original color, but I still have several different varieties and several different colors. This is one of my favorites here. Daisies start coming up in May, and they grow very rapidly. And in just a month's time, this is a good example of a plant that goes from just a little bit to all the way ready to flower in 1 month. The Salvia grows rapidly also, and this is a bee's favorite flower. They love to feed on these blossoms. And then the Hostas, as we saw in April, they started to come up and they really take off. Here's a couple of varieties that I have in my yard. And I'm going to add some more hostas. But the problem with hostas is their worst enemy is the snail and slug. They love hostas. And so you start seeing a lot of these in the yard. This time of the year, you also see the dreaded dandelion, which is an edible plant, and the bees love it also. It's kind of the methamphetamine of the bee world. So I don't put any poison on mine. I just pull them out. Transition to the chickens. In May, I usually do a pretty good cleanup of the coop, and I add some more wood shavings. And the chickens are laying lots of eggs in May, so we're having lots to eat and share with the neighbors. Back to the plants. The grapes are coming to life, and they're looking good. I didn't do a very good job with my grapes this year trellising, but now we're to the apples, and you start to see the apples. They're pollinated, and you start to see the little fruits form. Fruits grow quite a bit in May, but they've got a long ways to go. They're not going to be ready until late fall, just before the first frost. That's when they're the best. Next up is the Asian pears. They're forming fruit nicely. We're very well pollinated this year. We have way too many fruit on the vine, but they're going to be doing well. And also this time of the year, the peaches, from the dwarf peach trees, are all flowered or dried up, and they're starting to form the peaches, and they get to be pretty good size in a month also. They grow fast, and they're an earlier crop. Moving back into the vegetable and fruit garden, where the strawberries are coming on strong in May. And they start flowering, and then they start producing the green fruit, and then you start to see them blush. And this was the first ripe strawberry of the year, and we ended up having quite a few strawberries. Not as good as last year, and not as big, but we still had a pretty good success with the strawberries. The asparagus, they came up last month. We're just letting it go to seed. We just planted it last year, and so it needs time to get stronger and put on more spears. Now the horseradish is blooming, and it's getting ready to put on energy to the root. Now the rhubarb is about done. You start to see the flower stalks come up. If you don't stay on top of rhubarb picking it, it goes to seed quick. The chives are blooming. As you see, they put on a nice little bloom. You can eat those also. Cut them up, put them in salads. But the flowers are edible also, and they're nice. And you start seeing them get a little older and not as tasty. Now the garlic in the raised container garden is doing well. And we even have a scape on top. This is a soft neck variety, which doesn't form a lot of scapes, but we had a couple. Now the potatoes, from the beginning of the month, as you see, kind of a progression. They do a lot in a month. And they actually come spilling out of the potato bins by the end of the month. Egyptian walking onions are putting on their little top knot, and I call it the Medusa factor, where they start to shoot out these long tendrils, and then at the end of those tendrils, there'll be another flower, which they'll start creating the bulbs that end up on the end of their leaves. Peas in the cages that I built last month are doing well. They're not doing as well as I had hoped. It's a little bit of a shady spot. But they're growing, and the birds aren't eating them, and they're flowering, so we'll have some peas this year. We got our first clipping of mixed salad from our whiskey barrel planters. After the first week of May, I started planting the tomatoes, both here at my home garden, as well as the project garden, which we'll show in a little bit. But I planted these in an area this year that wasn't the best. Got some tomatoes, but not nearly as well as the project garden. Planted my earth boxes, got them all prepared and ready for eggplant and different types of peppers. So I went to the nursery and got some plants and got these all ready to roll, and they do very well. Get a very big harvest out of these little bins. Bought some brassicas and all my squashes and planted those in my home garden. And turned the sprinklers on for the first time. I'd hand watered, but now it's getting a little warmer, and everything is greening up and looking nice. Now with all the water, you get a little bit of a mushroom activity going on. These aren't edible, I don't believe, but they're kind of interesting, so I decided to take a few photos. And also on a piece of my firewood, I see this interesting little blob. It's got to be some kind of a fungi, mushroom, don't know what it is, but it was interesting to look at. Contacted by my school garden at Blessed Sacrament wanting a couple harvest baskets that I used to make and sell at the farmers market, so I took some time to build probably, I think, 7 of them, different varieties and different sizes. But the school wanted 2, and these are the 2 I got to them. We transition over to the project garden, and this is early May, and everything's still small, but it's coming up. These are beets, along with some weeds, it looks like. And the beets get bigger, and this is at the end of the month. They looked about like this. The onions are growing at the beginning of the month, and you see the brassicas that I planted. I didn't mention much about that, but I did plant that row of brassicas and cauliflower, cabbage. And I also planted tomatoes and used these little dinky cages that the homeowner had at the garden just to use them this year. And planted some pepper plants. And as you see at the end here, the strawberry bed, I weeded that out and got it ready for some transplants. And as the middle of the month, things grew pretty fast. And as you can see, they got bigger and bigger. And the onions got really tall. They got about a foot tall. And they started to bulb up, which is exciting. You can eat them at any phase. And this is a good, they're nice and sweet at this stage. We grew enough of them that we could pick some and start eating them now. And the radishes are really the first crop that you get in the spring. As you see, they grow pretty rapidly. It takes about 26 days or so. These are French breakfast radishes. And this is the first radish that didn't make it out of the garden. It went in my stomach right away. And we have a nice little look at different radishes. Now the potatoes started coming up here, and as the month progressed, they got a little bit thicker, a little bit taller. Not ready to mound yet. Now the beans started sprouting, and here's some kind of interesting look at beans that are just coming up out of the ground. And they got a long ways to go before they start producing beans, but they're started. Now the corn that I planted last month is coming up. Middle of May, we see our hummingbirds that come back every year. We see that, this year we have three or four of them, a little bit more than usual, but they must be the offspring of the ones. But they seem to come back every year to the same yard and raise their next brood. And there's some sadness in the garden as some of the baby birds fall out of their nests and their nest boxes. And you always find a few on the ground, wishing you could have saved them. Finally, we're transitioning over to project garden number 2, and one of the first tasks was to assist in a couple trees being removed, very large trees, just shading the whole yard. They were in the parking strip, not really the place, or close to the parking strip, not really the place for trees to be of this size. So as you see, this last one falling, there was one equally as big that I didn't quite get there in time for that. But we limbed it up, and I helped them clean up the debris and get ready for more of the landscaping tasks at this garden. Well, as you can see, May was a crazy month. I don't always remember everything that I do, and it's fun to go back and look. And this was a very busy month. So we'll see what June is. I haven't delved into June yet. Hopefully my next video will have a couple months in it, but I predict that June might be in July with all the harvest at the project garden, maybe just as busy. So this could be a multi-part series rather than just a couple. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching, and I appreciate your support.